In this video, I'm going to talk about the multi-dimensional array data structures. Well, I had planned on going right into lists after my last video on arrays, but I decided that I would do a video on multi-dimensional arrays first, which multi-dimensional arrays are, you know, just a lot like the one-dimensional arrays, but they have more than one dimension. And so we can have two different kinds. We can have the rectangular and the jagged. And so I'll first look at rectangular arrays. And so when you make a rectangular or multi-dimensional array, so you put your data type here, and then instead of just these square brackets, you do the square brackets, but with a comma in the middle there. You still do the name of it, you do the keyword new data type, and then you put a number of one number for the number of rows and then the number of columns. And as I'll discuss in just a minute, you can do more than two-dimensional arrays. You can do 3, 4, n-dimensional arrays, but I'll be looking at two-dimensional arrays here because those are kind of the I guess easiest to picture and think about. And so again, this is an array with a data type with rows going from 0 to the number of rows minus 1, because remember we're on this 0 index thing, so we will go from 0 to the number of rows minus 1, and then the columns is this second number here, and that goes from 0 to the number of columns minus 1. So if we look at a few different data types here, we can do an integer two-dimensional array, and so we'll just call that myInts new. And so we have 10 rows and 5 columns. And so this will be an array of integers with rows going from 0 to 9 and columns going from 0 to 4. We can look at it, we can do the same thing with float. And so here I have a 100 by 100. And so that goes from 0 to 99 in the rows and 0 to 99 in the columns. We can do characters. I have this from 2 to 19. So we have 2 rows, and then we have 0 to 18 columns here. And so we can do the same thing with strings here. So like I said, you can have more than two-dimensional. And so to do that, you just put more commas here in your square brackets. Then for 3 dimensions, you have the number of rows, the number of columns. Then I couldn't think of what to call this, so I just called it the number of depth. And so this would be a cubic array here. So the rows go from 0 to rows minus 1, columns 0 to columns minus 1, depth from 0 to depth minus 1. And so for instance, if we do a 5 by 5 by 5 cube, we would generate it this way, and then you would get something that's kind of like this, where it has 3 different coordinates on it. So you can start at 0, 0, 0, and then you can sort of count up this way from 0, 0, 0 to 0, 1, 0, and so on up to 0, 4, 0. Then you could start counting as you go this way, and you can count as you go down that way. And of course, like I said, you could make even higher dimensional arrays, but you start not being able to really show pictures of that. And so we'll look at a two-dimensional array here as our example. So we have data type, the square brackets with a comma, the name, keyword new, data type 10 by 10. So rows go from 0 to 9, columns from 0 to 9. And so I have this grid here where we see we start at 0, 0. It goes all the way up to 0, 9 columns. If you go down, it goes all the way up to 9, 0 rows. And then it goes up to 9, 9 for both of them. And so that's kind of the other thing to remember, is that the columns are the vertical. So this is column 1, column 2, 3, so on. And then the rows are going across. And so we have row 0, row 1, row 2, and so on going down like that. And the first number is the rows, and the second number is the columns. All right, and so the other type of multi-dimensional array are what are called jagged arrays, and we'll see here in a second why they call them jagged arrays. And so the way I think about this is that it's essentially like you make an array where each element of the array is itself an array. And so to generate that, you have to use this syntax here. So dataType, then you do two of these square brackets like this. And then the name of it, keyword new, then the dataType. And so you put a 5 here, so there are sort of 5 members of the array into which we will put other arrays. And then this square bracket here is just telling you that you are not setting a length for each of the arrays that we will put into this array. And then so in this one we've made an array that has 5 elements that can then take other arrays in as elements. So we set the 0th index in our array to an array that's 4 that has 4 elements in it. Then we set the second one, or index 1, to one that has 3 elements, and then 10, 6, and 7. And so it kind of looks like this, where we have this array here in the black that is our 5 element array, and then into each one of these elements of this array we can put other arrays. So in element 0 here we have an array of length 4, in element 1 an array of length 3, element 2 an array of length 10, and so on. And then so more explicitly that would look kind of like this. So we have this this first one here, this row here is our this is our first element of the array that we made up here, and then we put these 4 elements into it. So what I should have done actually is these ones right here I should have actually sort of gotten rid of, because in this jagged array those elements don't actually exist, because we're putting a 4 element array into this first element of our jagged array here, and so it only has 4. Then same thing for this one down here, I should have gotten rid of all of those, because we are only putting a 3 element array into that second element of our jagged array. So ignore these empty squares here. Those aren't actually elements in our array here. So those don't actually exist in our array. Those aren't like spaces that can be filled. That was just sort of an oversight on my part. But you can see that why it's called jagged, because these different arrays in here of different sizes gives it this sort of jagged appearance here, and so that's why they're called jagged arrays. And so another sort of helpful thing is that string data type arrays can always be used like they are jagged arrays. And so each letter in the string essentially takes up an element of one of the element arrays within the jagged array. And so if we make an array here, a string type, and we have it be 2 elements long, then we put in the 0th one the word hello, and then in the index 1 we put world with this exclamation point here. And so we have this right here, this first row would be the 0th index, then the second row here would be the 1 index. But each letter in the word you can actually think of as being like its own array. And so if you put this into your code where we have the 0, 0 here, it would give you the H from this point right here in our jagged array. And you could do the same thing for all the other letters in here. So yeah, like I said, it's kind of nice because you can always use these one-dimensional string arrays. You can sort of look through, you can pick out the letters, each individual letter in the words in the string for each of the elements of your array. And so now I'm going to actually look at some code here so we can actually see how this works. And so the first thing I'm going to do is look at our rectangular array. And so I'm going to make a method here that will give us our rectangular array. So we have public, I'm going to do int, comma, square bracket like that. Then I will do rectangular array maker, put the two parentheses there at the end to make it into a method. And so what this is it's a method that whose output type will be this two-dimensional array here. And so what I'm going to do is I'll do int square bracket comma square bracket close. I'll call it rect array, or rect r, I guess, equals new. Then we'll do int square bracket 3 comma 3 like that, then semicolon. And I'm going to do this. You'll see why in a second, but I'm just making this int k here be equal to 1. And like I said, we'll see why in a second. And so what I'm going to do, so we want to iterate through this two-dimensional array. So if you remember from the previous video, when we iterated through a one-dimensional array, we just needed a for loop. So we'll do for int I equals 0, semicolon. We'll do I less than 3, and I'll just auto-complete it like that. So if we had a one-dimensional array, we could iterate through it here, but since we have a two-dimensional array, what we actually have to do is put another for loop in here. So int j, so I'll just use those auto-completes like that. And so what I'm going to do is do rect r square bracket I j close square bracket equals k. Then I'm going to put plus plus like that. And so each element of it will be given a number that's sort of one more than the last element. And so down here in the main method, which is where we actually have to write the code that is going to get actually get utilized. And so we can then call this method up here when we do that. And so what I'm going to do, so multi-d arrays, and so I have to instantiate this as an object, which I'll use this multi-d arrays here. So we have to instantiate this up here in order to use the method inside of it. And so what I'm going to do is int, comma, square bracket like that. Then we will do rect r equals, and then I'm going to do multi-d arrays. And so see, now we've used this object here, we've used it to call our method, and so this will actually generate this right here, which will be a two-dimensional array that's built based on this method up here. And so then what I want to do, because this up here, these two for loops are going to populate our two-dimensional array with those numbers. I actually want to print those out now. And so what I'm actually going to do is just copy those and paste. I'm going to get rid of that. So we want to iterate through that whole thing. And now I will do console.write, and we will do rect r I j like that. And I'm going to put this extra space in the middle there. And so that will give us those numbers sort of in order with nice spaces between them. And I'm actually going to do console.write line here, and you'll see I'm doing this outside this second for loop, but within the first one. And so when we cycle through one of the rows, it will then put this blank space here and go down to the next one. And so what we see Wait, so I have to give this a return. So this has to return our rect r. So you always have to watch out for that. So we will get this going, and so we see up here we have 1, 2, 3. That's our first row, then 4, 5, 6 in our second row, then 7, 8, 9 in our third row. And so we have populated each of the spaces in that rectangular array like that. And so that is sort of, how you use a rectangular array. So when you do these rectangular arrays, you use a lot of these nested for loops like that. All right, now I will look at the jagged array. So public, we'll do int 2 square brackets like that, then jagged array maker. And what I'm actually going to do is give this parameters. And so I'm going to give it parameters for 3 different arrays. And you'll see why here in a minute. So int r3. So this method will actually have to take 3 arguments for it in order for it to work. All right, so what I'm going to do in here, int the 2 square brackets, we'll call it jag r, and equals new int 3, and then the second one will have no number in it. Then we can have jag r, and this will be 0. And so it's the 0th element of that jag r, but now we are putting this first one here into it, and so we can then sort of put all 3 of them in there. I'll just do the autocomplete for this. And so now we are populating these 3 different elements of our array with the arrays that will be input into this method. All right, and so we'll go back to the main method here, and what I'm going to do is int, I'm going to make our arrays, so new int, and we'll make this one have 2 elements, int. So this one I'm going to give it 7 elements, int r3 equals new int, and that will have, we'll go with 4 elements for that. And so those are our 3 different arrays that we're going to add as elements to our jagged array. And so we will do int and jag array equals multi-d arrays dot, and we will do jagged, the jagged array maker. We'll put our 3 arrays in there, and so now this jag r here is our 3-member array that we made up here, where each of these R1, R2, and R3 are the members of that array. And so I will go down here. Well, actually, first we need to go up here. And again, I'm going to do int k equals 1. So we want to populate all the different elements in here. And so what I'm going to do is we'll just kind of let those, or use the autocomplete for those. So we have that right there. So this one is going to be while I is below 3. But what we will see now, so I'm going to put this in here. I'll change this to J, and now instead of just less than 3, we want it to be less than the length of each array that is an element of our array. And so what we will do for this is jag r, and then we want to do the ith member of it, because we're going to cycle, see, between 0, 1, and 2 with the I, and then we will do length. So it's the length of the ith member of that array. And so then we will do jag r I j, and we will do equals k plus plus. And so that will put those numbers into their into each element of the arrays inside our jagged array. And so now we want to be able to print those out so we can see it. And so I'm going to do a for each loop here. And so it's going to be int. So we're looking at the integer with the square bracket here because those are the elements of our jagged array. So I will use that, and then I'll just use item in jag array. So we have that. Now we can just use a for loop. So int j equals 0. So now we have this. So the jag array, we don't want this because this will just be our 3. So we want it for each item in our jagged array. So these items are the arrays inside our jagged array. And so we want it for each item length here. And so then we can do, again, console.write, and we will do item j plus put our space in there. And so this item j, so it's going to be the jth element of that item, where the items are the arrays in there. And once again, I forgot to put the return on here, so return jag r, so we can have that. Again, I'm going to do console.write line to give us a space in there, and I'm actually going to put a couple spaces in here as well, just to separate our first printout from our second printout here. And so we can click the go button on this. And so this was from our rectangular array. Now we have this. So remember, our first array inside there was 2 members long. Then the second one was 7. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then the third one was 4. And so though we have this sort of jagged looking array here where each row is one of the elements of our jagged array, which is an array itself. And then we have these numbers, which are the elements of those arrays, which are in the jagged array. And so that is sort of how that looks there. And so, like I said, we can also do use that for string type. And so I'm actually going to look at that here. So we'll do string with square bracket strings equal new string, and then we'll just say 2 for that. We'll do strings 0 is equal to hello, and then strings 1 is equal to, and I'm actually going to put a space in here just to keep those separated from each other when I print it out. And so that's actually going to be an extra sort of letter or character or whatever in our string there. So it won't be exactly like I have in the notes. And so then what we can do for each string s in strings, we will then do for int I equals 0. We want it to be I less than the s, which are the sort of members of our strings. So the letters in our strings, the s are these strings, and then we are looking at each letter in the string. And so this is the length of the particular strings. So like this hello one would be 5, this world one would be, well, it'd actually be 7 here if we count that blank there. And so we will do console.write, and we'll do S and I plus, give us our little blank there. And so that will print out the string letter by letter with a space between each of them. So we will run the program. And so you see that right here. We have hello world where it printed out each element one by one. And so, like I said, we can use strings almost as jagged arrays. So every word that you put into your array, you can actually sort of pick out each letter in it by using it like it's a jagged array. But anyway, those are the introduction. This is the introduction here to these multi-dimensional arrays. The code that I was just writing, if you want to look at it, I do have it on the last page here of the show notes, which will be in the description down below. And this, I have included these comments on it to help you kind of understand what's going on if you want to look through that on your own. But anyway, I hope you found this video helpful, and I will see you in the next one.